Mr. Galt and I have had the opportunity to visit a lot of our buildings in our district, and our most successful buildings have been founded on shared leadership and collaboration. When you walk in the buildings, you don't know who the building principal is, you don't know who the building rep is based on their roles. Everything is shared and mutual, and that's how the work is getting done. So what we've decided to do is approach and interact with 4 more buildings within our district towards a shared leadership approach. And in the union's eyes, shared leadership is really about a commitment. The commitment that the folks are district leaders, myself, Mr. Galt, Mr. Murphy, Ms. Myers, all the folks that are here to make sure that the people telling us the problems they have and the resources they need, that we're accountable to getting those to those individuals. It's also a commitment on our part to let those closest to the problem figure out the solutions, tell us what they need, and let us work towards that. So that is really where Union's position right now on shared leadership and moving these buildings forward. We know that relationships with adults will translate into relationships with students, and those relationships will translate into academic achievement. So, Mr. Galt?
So real quick about shared leadership. We want to practice what we preach. And over in the middle of our table, we have our building educators. I'm going to call them educators because they're leaders. They're educators and leaders. It doesn't matter what role you are, it's what you bring to the table in your leadership. So if we really want to have shared leadership, it starts with us, and it also needs to move into the building level. And if we want to talk about collaboration, that's hard work. Hard work. Collaboration is about building trust, working together through our issues. It means that we find a way to find solutions to difficult problems. And we're committed to do that here in Toledo, and we want to talk a little bit about what we're offering within our schools here.
We have 4 different buildings with 4 different needs, 4 different personalities within those buildings, and we really have to let those buildings design what it is that they need and how it's going to unfold. So I have a colleague, Kim Sams, who is an administrator that I'm working with. That is our shared leadership team. And our responsibility is to facilitate this work in those schools and let it unfold for them. So we are using professional development as the catalyst for this work. It's something that they can rally around as a building that everyone will be learning together, from administration through teachers, and then using that process to build the relationships in the buildings, to build that piece of trust, improve communication, and ultimately student achievement as well. So our responsibility will be to facilitate the work, to act as a critical friend in some cases. We're holding them accountable. They're creating improvement plans, and those plans really are very personalized. And that's the piece that's a little uncomfortable for me, I have to admit. I've had to get out of my comfort zone because I can't tell them exactly what this is going to look like. I can just help them do the work that they need to do within their buildings. And I think for us, at least from my standpoint, yesterday was a really exciting day for us. I think we kind of all came to this realization that we don't have to have all the answers right now. And that's really how this work gets done. So what they're working on now is deciding how they are going to begin the early implementation around professional development in their buildings. Kim and I will be participating in supporting that professional development and any follow-up that needs to occur. We'll also be a line of communication between the buildings and Kevin and Jim, and holding them accountable for the support that they have promised to the buildings. But besides just building these relationships in the buildings, we want the 4 buildings to also build relationships with each other and be a support system of learning together.
The things that we did differently this time, and for those of you that are probably involved with school improvement grants, Race to the Top, we always know it seems like all the resources and attention are put into your lowest performing buildings just by default. And we have not seen a lot of success with those types of initiatives. So we know that this is not a 6-month program, it's not an initiative, this is a culture change for buildings. So what we did is we actually called in the buildings that Mr. Galt has, I don't want to say reign over, but, that he supports and assists. And then through those, we had the conversation, presented to all of them, and then for those that were interested, we kind of did an interview selection process for the buildings based on need and the potential for success. We don't want to start a program or a culture change in buildings where, there's never going to be a chance of success when there's too many obstacles. We know with education we have teacher evaluations, over-assessment, all the things that are going on. And we also see this professional development that the buildings are receiving, changing the dialogue from the complaining and this is happening, to a common focus and a vision of positive of what they're going to move towards. And we're going to continue that dialogue, and I think it's like...
And from a district standpoint, we had 4 schools that over 80% of their staff said, we want to do this. We want the professional development. We want to not only have the professional development, we want to implement it within our classrooms. Now, when dollars are stretched and budgets are tight, and you have 80% of a staff that says, not only do we want this learning, we want to put it into practice, that's an easy decision for me in terms of as the rein, so to speak, of the purse strings. Because not only are we getting high-quality professional development, we're getting it implemented to where it's going to improve student achievement. Now, the great thing about Toledo is that, value added is a dirty word in many places across our state and our country. But we're happy to announce that we are an A-rated value-added district, the only one in the state of Ohio. We went from an F to an A, and that is by working together, providing meaningful professional development that moves the dial on student achievement. And this was a no-brainer for us. Yesterday, you had a chance to meet Saul and spend the morning with him as he went through and gave you professional development. What you don't know, about a week and a half ago, Saul came to Toledo, and we were able to pull 5 or 6 building leaders from each of these 4 buildings to come in and to have a day of professional development. That is powerful. And what that's going to do is this professional development is going to be the catalyst for overall shared leadership within these 4 buildings and across the district as we move the dial on student achievement.
And, that's, again, the support from AFT having Saul come in. It's one thing to hear about the research. It's another thing to have the researcher presenting and engaging in dialogue around the findings. And all of our folks left from there, much like you probably did yesterday, thinking that was one of the best presentations and best engagements you've had. Now, you've heard Jim talk about the 80% staff. And the reason we did that is we took votes in buildings. Because one of the things that we have a tradition in Toledo, and I think many of us in this room do, is really safeguarding our own profession, policing our own. And we know that best practices, we can go to PD all day long and hear about best practices, but until they make it into the classrooms, we don't know if they're working and we don't know if they're having an impact on student achievement. So one of the commitments that the union has made is, with the vote in the building and selecting the 4 buildings and moving forward, is that we're going to work to make sure that there is adult implementation. And we're going to allow the buildings to develop best practices and their monitoring tools of how adult implementation works. We know that when you talk about accountability and adult implementation, everyone kind of freezes up. But it shouldn't be that way, because it's not really a gotcha moment. It should be about professional growth and how we can support one another in the best practices. The biggest complaint I hear as the union president and union leader walking through buildings, we don't have enough time. We don't have enough time to talk. We don't have enough time to collaborate. And we don't have enough time to really sharpen our swords and our practices for one another. And we see this, using this shared leadership model, as the opportunity to create that social capital in the buildings. It's not about adding more dollars to the buildings. It's about reprioritizing how they're being spent and putting them where they matter most, back in the classrooms.
And I just want to add, one of the other really exciting pieces, and probably scary too for the buildings, is that they really have had a commitment from both Jim and Kevin that they have the opportunity to really think outside the box and get innovative with how they want this to work in their buildings. We talk about time being an issue. They have a great idea how they might better utilize time in their building to do what they want to do. They have the freedom to at least propose that they want to make a change, and it will be considered that they may be able to make some changes that way, or ways that they want to implement their professional development, or how they want to do the adult implementation monitoring in the building. They'll personalize in their building what that's going to look like. I think that's really exciting for them, because we're really at a time where, with so many mandates and requirements that are thrown upon us, we don't feel like we have a lot of control right now. And the control is being given back to the buildings.